pretty wild show, I think, to say the least, planned out for you guys today. And before you just click out of this or leave some clickbaity comment, just try to listen what I'm going to say for the beginning portion of it, because I think I can land this plane with it making a decent amount of sense. But with that being said, let's talk about whether or not the Falcons could trade for Micah Parsons. So a Dallas sports radio host recently hopped on the airwaves and talked about Micah Parsons. And here's what he said. I've heard from way too many people this offseason. I'm talking about at least 4 different people have told me that Micah has worn thin here. I don't know how much is true and how much it actually hurts his reputation. I don't know whether this is the behavior of a typical superstar. I don't know how damaging it is, but all I do know is this. I've heard from way too many people that if Micah Parsons was out of there, there would be a decent amount of people inside the Ford Center at the Star in Frisco smiling or breathing a sigh of relief. Now, my first thought when I saw that was, don't tempt Jerry Jones to not pay a star player because he loves not spending money. So for how rich he is, the Cowboys are always one of the smallest spenders in free agency and contracts given out. They love their guys and they draft well, and they do draft well. But I would be blown away if Micah Parsons is not a Dallas Cowboy for, if not all of his career, 90% of it. But I will add, we have seen unexpected trades before. So while I say I'd be blown away, we were blown away like a week ago when Stephon Diggs got traded to the Houston Texans. We woke up that morning thinking that was going to happen. Or the two off seasons ago, when Tyreek Hill, out of the blue, just got traded from the Chiefs to the Dolphins. Like, go back to when that trade happened. There was no chatter around that trade happening. They just won a Super Bowl, right? Who thought they were going to move on from Tyreek Hill? Absolutely nobody. Or when Russell Wilson got dealt. Like, there was some level of talk, but still, even then, he ended his last press conference in Seattle with, I want to stay in Seattle. I want to be a Seahawk. And that kind of killed a lot of the trade speculation until it didn't. Or when Devontae Adams got traded from the Packers to the Raiders. So this is the NFL. We do get unexpected trades maybe a little bit more often than we think, because it's just hard to wrap our brains around. Why would the Cowboys ever trade Micah Parsons? But if it ever did come to that, where folks in Dallas were not thrilled with Micah maybe off the field, he's always been a bit vocal, let's put it, on social media. His family members have not shied away from offering their opinions and thoughts. And ultimately, if you're a superstar player, teams are going to overlook that type of stuff compared to if you are the 53rd guy in a roster, maybe. So I got to believe that somehow, some way, like, this is not going to be a big deal. And listen, superstars tend to be divas, right? And teams put up with divas if they're really, really good at their jobs. And Micah is really, really good at his job. But also, if the Cowboys have a high bar for their players and they don't really want to give Micah Parsons what I think will become one of the biggest contracts for a defensive player in NFL history, maybe they look to move on if they feel like, you know what, we went all in for 2024, didn't work out. We're going to move on from Dak Prescott. Might as well move on from Micah too and do a full rebuild and get a boatload of draft picks. Like, that is a world where I don't think it's existing all the way by Neptune. Maybe it's by the moon, still kind of far, but not that far away. So it's not going to happen this offseason. If a Micah Parsons trade does go down, I am confident enough that it won't happen before the 2024 season. But maybe next offseason, when Micah would be entering the final year of his rookie contract, and if the Cowboys, have another early playoff exit, and Dak Prescott's deal is up, and Dallas does not bring Dak back, and they're like, we're going to look for a new quarterback. No sense in paying Micah Parsons $30 to $35 million or whatever a season. Let's get some first-round draft picks for him and start this rebuild off with a lot of ammunition. So let me toss this your way now. Do you want to trade for Micah Parsons? This is the pinned comment on the video, so If a YouTube ad break comes on by, just scroll on down. Give me a yes or no down below. It's hard not to be excited about the idea of trading for Micah Parsons. Like, if he is a bit of a prima donna, I can put up with it for how productive he is every single Sunday. I mean, you don't get Micah Parsons every single year in the NFL. He's a linebacker and a defensive end at the same time. Like, you don't have to be a football savant to know that doesn't happen. You can't be a linebacker because linebackers have to be fast. They have to help in pass coverage. They have to stop the run. But you also can't be a defensive end because they have to get after the quarterback. Like, those traits, they're not in this year's draft class. There's no guy like that. There was no guy in last year's draft like that. And I doubt we see a guy in next year's draft like that. So, for that reason, I bet Raheem Morris will be chomping at the bit. Some background on Micah here. He's got 2 years left on his rookie contract. Of course, Dallas picked up his fifth-year option for 2025. So if a team did trade for him next offseason, there would be 1 year left on his deal, and surely a trade would be followed by a contract extension almost immediately. He's been extremely productive for a linebacker, which he isn't. He's a defensive end. It's just, he's Micah. He's kind of his own position. Like, Patterson was the Joker last year. He's fourth in sacks since he entered the league back in 2021. And he's also super young. He turns 25 years old in May. So if a trade did go down a year from today, next year, whatever, he would be 25 joining the Atlanta Falcons with 7 to 8 more great seasons ahead of him. I think there would be almost every single team in the NFL lining up to have an opportunity for Micah to come over to their squad. And why don't we just show his stats? Because I don't think I need to convince anyone that Micah's a phenomenal football player. 13 sacks, 17 tackles for loss, 59 tackles. I mean, if you really need some convincing, he's right there with the best in the league. And he's not a true-ish, he's a defensive end, but he's built like a linebacker. It's a rare blend. It's something you don't see every year in the draft. So he's right behind Myles Garrett and Nick Bosa in terms of sacks and tackles for loss over the last 2 seasons, and tied or just ahead of Max Crosby and Danielle Hunter. So if you're curious, all right, you've got me sold. Now, what would it cost to get Micah? We're talking next year, right? This is not going to happen this year. I think it would cost next year's first-round pick for the Falcons. So who knows what that pick number is going to be. The following year's first-round pick, so 2 first-rounders, and I would say a second-rounder. That feels, I think, fair. I mean, you got to look at what quarterbacks go for. You also don't see defensive ends and pass rushers, like top-tier ones, traded very often. So you don't have a great blueprint, but I think this is probably in the neighborhood of what Dallas would at least be looking for if they felt like we moved on from Dak. Again, we're talking a year from now, and we want to rebuild. Let's go get 2 first-round picks this year, 2 first-round picks next year, draft Shedeur Sanders, and we're ready to roll. Now, if you're wondering, all right, but what about 2024? Because if this isn't going to happen until next year, what are we going to do about this year's pass rush? Don't worry. I've got an idea as to what Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot's plan is. But first, I want to tell you guys about our sponsor, which is Prize Picks. That is daily fantasy made easy. When I say easy, I mean easy peasy lemon squeezy. Because all you do is pick 2 to 6 players and then choose more or less on their stat projections. And you can turn like $10, for example, into 5 times your money. So let me give you the selections I am rolling with tonight. Taking the more on Austin Riley at 0.5 RBIs. There's also a demon next to it, which means it's a slightly difficult stat projection to reach. But if you do reach it, it's a much more lucrative payout. I also like the more on Aaron Gordon at 0.5 3-pointers made. This is just going to keep me engaged in a Nuggets Jazz game I had no business watching. But because I've got some winnings to be had, you better know. Better believe I'll be watching this thing. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. I put that link, by the way, in the comments and description of today's video. So download Prize Picks today and use code CLNS to receive that deposit match. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. So as for 2024, because it would be fun to just, roster bait a little bit to Micah Parsons joining this defense next year. But that's next year. How about this year? Well, there's definitely going to be some additions made to it. I don't think the plan in Flowery Branch is to just roll into 2024 with this starting five up front. I know additions are coming because the NFL draft is next up, right? So I know additions are coming. You know additions are coming. We're probably being a little bit just, I wouldn't say impatient necessarily, but we're just excited and maybe a little bit of impatience, somewhere in the middle. But I feel like the Falcons will likely go edge rusher in round 1, circle back to it later on in the draft, probably double dip at pass rusher, although I'm not crazy about this pass rushing class after the top 3 guys, and even the top 3 guys I've got questions about. And then they sign a cheap free agent, and I'm sure they had bigger aspirations, right? They wanted Montez Sweat. Didn't work out. Some say they wanted to trade for Khalil Mack. He took a pay cut to stay in L.A. They got Kirk Cousins, which meant they couldn't go afford Danielle Hunter. So for me, I think they unfortunately missed out on some of the marquee guys they were hoping to get, and now they got to settle for a more plan B or maybe even down to plan C approach here. So here are my predictions as to what I think is going to happen. I think in round 1, they're going to go get Dallas Turner. I've already said Dallas Turner is a Falcon. I do not believe the Atlanta Falcons will pass on Dallas Turner if he's available at pick number 8. He comes off an extremely productive season for the Crimson Tide. 15 tackles for loss, 10 sacks. He's the fastest pass rusher in this draft class. He's got a great combination of athletic traits and production at his time in Tuscaloosa. And I think Raheem Morris is going to look at him thinking that combination of size, speed, and production, he's going to do wonders in my defense. Then moving ahead here, I don't think they go back to edge in round 2, but they have 2 third-round picks. And I could see them going after pass rusher Jonah Ellis out of Utah. Last year for the Utes, 16 tackles for loss, 12 sacks, and 39 pressures. He's 6'2", 248 pounds. Now, he wins with his first step and acceleration. That's where he makes his money because he is able to beat the offensive tackle to the point of attack. Now, if you recognize the name, it's because he is the younger brother of current Falcons linebacker Caden Ellis. So it would be kind of cool if you could have both Ellises on one team. I think that alone would be worth the draft pick almost. But to be honest with you, I don't like the day 2 edge crop. Like, I was initially going to go with Muhammad Kamara at this spot. He had like 13 sacks last season for Colorado State. But I don't want to be, discriminating against conferences. But you play in the Mountain West. He was a 5th-year guy. He's probably going up against some 18 and 19-year-old tackles from Nevada and like Boise State. Maybe that's where the production came from. And I don't know if that's going to translate well to the NFL if you are that old and you're just picking on younger guys, because that's kind of what college football has become. It's great for colleges. It's great for coaches, right? Why wouldn't you want a 23 or 24-year-old defensive end going after a tackle who's 4 or 5 years younger than him? But for draft evaluations, it sure makes it tough. Everywhere I look, I just don't really like this day 2 class. And so maybe it's not a good idea to go after an edge rusher at all, because you could just be kind of forcing a pick and wasting it when it could be better used on someone else. But I got to believe Atlanta's going to keep throwing darts at the edge rusher board because they couldn't do that in free agency, or they didn't do it in free agency. Speaking of free agency, I wouldn't be shocked if they bring back Calais Campbell. Right after the season ended, Campbell spoke to D. Ledbetter, I believe it was, from the AJC, and him and Raheem, Terry Fontenot sure sounded like 2 guys that wanted to find a way to bring back the Walter Payton Man of the Year, who was tied with Bud Dupree for the team lead in sacks with 6.5 last season, 10 tackles for loss, 56 tackles. Despite his age, he actually played a very high percentage of snaps. Like, I went into this portion of the show thinking, okay, Calais Campbell probably slowed down at the end of last season as Zach Harrison picked up, but that actually was not the case at all. So I don't think it's a bad idea to bring back Calais Campbell, right? Toss him back on this Falcons defensive line, get a rotation of Campbell, Harrison, Onyemata, Jarrett, and probably a rookie. And that's not the best defensive line of football, but it's not the worst. And for what Atlanta has to work with at this point, that might be making the best out of a, so-so situation. So if you make all these moves, you can have a pass rush like this. Dallas Turner, Arnold Ebiketie, who I think last year showed some good improvements from his rookie season and just overall half glass full mentality of he could take a big step forward in year 3. Get Grady Jarrett back from a torn ACL. He's been working his tail off in rehab. Add Calais Campbell once again. David Onyemata to sit in the middle of the defensive line. And listen, that defensive line, like I said, I don't think is top 5 in the NFL. Not top 10 probably either. But it's not bottom 5. And you'll be asking your offense to score a lot of points. But hopefully this defense can come up with a few stops. Because last year, there were one too many fourth quarter game-winning drives given up by the opposing offense. So before we get on out of here, just a random question to wrap up the show. I think it was yesterday or something. I was like, hey, scroll on down, type ATL if you're watching. Shout out your city for me to wrap up the show. I do love the end of the video crew, so now I kind of want to just, not to be a creepo or anything, but, know where everyone's watching from. So shout out your city for me down in the comment section. That will do it for us on this edition of Falcons Today. If you enjoyed our content, consider subscribing, and we will catch you all next time here on the show.